Hello again, and in this short video I'm just going to explain how to use the price increase calculator. So I know a lot of business owners, I myself included in this, are always worried about increasing our prices for fear of losing our customers. But what this price increase calculator software does is it shows you with your business how many customers you could actually lose and not actually be any worse off. I say software, it's similar to the increased profit software insofar as it's using Excel. So if you want to, you can put your company name in here. So I'm going to call this test company in there. And then the next thing you need to do is put in your sales. So I'm just going to put an example amount in here. So I'm going to put £200,000 in there, but obviously you put in your own sales in there. And then you put in your existing gross profit margin. So if you don't have any cost of sales, don't put any in there, but I'm going to assume a 50% margin there. So here you can see that we've got £200,000 worth of sales, our gross profit margin is 50%, so our existing gross profit is £100,000. And then you'll see down here that it's populated all of the columns here. So for example, I always like to use this column here as the example, and you'll see that 10% increase in your prices with a 50% gross profit margin, you can lose nearly 16.7% of your customers, or call it 17% to round it up, and you'll not actually be any worse off. The important thing is to recognize here though is should you not lose as many customers or no customers at all by making that increase, your gross profit increases from the £100,000 here to £120,000, or your margin increases to 54.5%. So taking a more realistic type of increase of say 5%, you'd have to lose just over 9% of your customers. If you didn't lose any, your new margin would be 52.4%, and you'd increase your gross profit to £110,000, or increased by £10,000. And of course, the beauty of increasing your prices is that in theory your overheads stay the same, so any increases here go straight to your bottom line. If you scroll down, you'll see that I've taken it up to a maximum increase price of 50% here. So if you were able to increase your prices by 50%, you never know, you could be in a particular industry whereby there's not much competition, then you could possibly do that. But I would already suggest that if you're in that scenario, your prices will be reflective of that. But you never know, you could have just lost a competitor, so you might be feeling confident that you could increase your prices because all of a sudden you've got a lot more business. There's supply and demand at the end of the day. And if you could get away with increasing your prices by 50%, you could lose up to 50% of your customers and not be worse off. But should you retain them all, you've doubled your gross profit to £200,000. I think it's worthwhile saying at this point, mentioning the Pareto effect, which is the 80-20 rule. Where the Pareto effect applies to business is sometimes you'll find that you'll get 80% of your profits from 20% of your customers, or you'll get 80% of your work or production done from 20% of your staff, and so on. And I actually did this exercise with a previous business of mine. In fact, it was my chartered accounting practice that I had. And what I looked at was the split between how many customers, or how many clients I had that produced the majority of my income. And I was actually intrigued to find that 80% of my income did actually come from 20% of my customers. It wasn't exactly, but it was as near as damn it. And I thought, wow, I was actually flabbergasted that it did actually come out that way. So what I then did is I looked at the 20% of income which was effectively being produced by 80% of my customers. So I could lose a big proportion of those and my business wouldn't be overly affected. But what would be important is that I'd be making more profit for working a lot less. So instead of actually sacking those clients, well, actually I did sack a number of clients because I got rid of customers that I really didn't want to be dealing with. And I increased those prices of that 20%. Yes, I did lose some customers, but not as many as I thought, and all of a sudden that 80% were then contributing a bigger percentage to the overall picture. Interesting, just going back on what I just said there about working with customers that you like to work with, or getting rid of customers that you don't like working with, it's very cathartic. I do remember sitting down with one particular customer who was really difficult customer, and all my staff hated him. And as it happens, was when I was going through the process of trying to encourage him to leave, I had my office door open, and he just wouldn't take the hint. And I tried increasing his prices by, well, I think I tripled his prices, but he still said, okay, I understand what you're saying. And in the end, I just had to say, look, I'm sorry, but the relationship is not working, and I got rid of the guy, and my staff were really happy about what had actually happened there. I know it's not always possible to do that. For example, in my fitted furniture business, it's quite difficult because we deal with so many different customers, and of course you have a sales team, and it's in their interest just to sell because they get a commission. They don't necessarily worry about the consequences, I have to be honest. But if you have a business whereby you do have a say, and we all have those awkward customers that end up causing a lot of grief, and if you then look at the 80-20 rule, and I bet you'll find that if you looked at the 80-20 scenario again, you'll probably get 80% of your hassle and problems from 20% of your customers. So the customers that come through, they buy from you and they move on, and they're lovely to deal with, no problems, and don't take up too much time, whereas the ones that are just really finicky, or they find problems for nothing and so on, they take up all of your time. And I always recommend that if you can deal with that and get rid of them, then great, because you've got a much better business to deal with thereafter. So there's a little bit more detail in there than just for the price increase calculator, but it just throws out some interesting concepts there. There is one more thing I'd just like to add when you're looking at increasing your prices. Just be very careful, because I did have a customer of mine when I had my accounting practice whereby he had a significant customer that represented a large percentage of his turnover. And I think at the time it was somewhere between 60 and 70% of his turnover. And what he did was he did increase his prices by a significant percentage because he just felt that he couldn't make his business work at the level they were. And what happened was that customer pulled the rug from beneath him, and he then had to suffer the consequences of that. And in his words, it was like slowing down the Titanic. He had to sack a load of staff. He had to change things significantly. He did survive what had happened, but it did cause awful problems in the first place. So please be aware that if your business is heavily dependent on one customer, it may be that you're just setting out as a new business, and you're still trying to build up your customer base. So just a little bit careful of that. But if you're an established business and you are dependent on one large customer, then I'd be a little bit careful about putting the prices up for that large customer of yours. You'd have to look at it very, very carefully before you did so. I think that's all for now. Thank you for listening, and bye for now.